Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to OSEAN's 64th weekly seminar and the 168th international seminar. Today, I will be presenting the paper, and this paper is a review paper on remote sensing and image analysis of macroplastic litter. You may be surprised that it is 2026, but this paper is actually already available on MPB website. So as I have shared previously via the email. So I chose this paper mainly because some of us were in Taiwan for the conference and we met Dr. Kako. And I thought this paper would be interesting to study to see the most popular technology used and and to see the machine learning activities occurring in the study field in the recent years. So here are the key points from the abstract of this paper. This review paper focused on recent advances in remote sensing and AI-driven image analysis for detecting macroplastic litter. As we will see later, the papers published up to 2024 were selected and reviewed individually to focus on applications of remote sensing platforms, including webcams, drones, balloons, aircraft, and satellites for monitoring plastic litter in coastal and riverine areas. There were considerable variability in quantification metrics, which complicates cross-study comparisons and data harmonization. So moving on to the introduction, here are the three main aims of the study. First is to summarize current remote sensing approaches for plastic litter detection. Second, to examine the role of AI in classification and quantification tasks. And thirdly is to propose a roadmap toward method and data harmonization globally. So this paper is actually very long. It's 19 pages. So I will go through each part pretty quickly and as fast as possible. So for the second part, this is material and methodology. The research method was divided into three parts. Firstly is literature search strategy. Second is optimization and screening procedure. And thirdly is thematic categorization. So for the first part, authors used keyword search on Scorpius database to identify peer-reviewed studies on the detection and monitoring of plastic litter using remote sensing platforms. They focused on image-based analysis, including RGB imagery and spectral data, and included studies only until 2024. So a total of 401 papers were identified. From there, all articles were manually screened to assess relevance, while unrelated papers were excluded. Since there were some papers that weren't identified in the keyword search, the authors additionally added manually the list of papers that they will use. So in total, 109 studies were selected for in-depth analysis and citation for this review. The results of their selection is as shown in the pie chart on the left. As you can see, 50% of the papers chosen were from studies with drone, followed by studies using satellite. These two were identified as the top two research method in all the 109 studies chosen. If you see figure 1A, the authors classified the papers by remote sensing platforms. Here you can see that both drone and satellite studies started since 2017 and 2018, and both methods have continuously represented a large portion of the studies since then. I suspect that this could be an influence in the drop of price of drones, as well as researchers being limited or unable to go to monitoring sites during Corona. So this is like an alternative method for the traditional monitoring methods. Additionally, the authors also classified the papers by image analysis techniques, which you can see in figure 1B. Here, they mainly categorized it by machine learning, deep learning, and others. So these others refers to traditional monitoring or other rule-based monitoring, which we'll see later in more detail. in the following sections. So as you can see from this figure, the studies employing machine learning began to emerge in 2018 and followed a rapid increase in deep learning studies after 2020. Despite so, others remain widely adopted. To supplement the difference in machine learning and deep learning, the authors also separated machine learning and deep learning for drones and satellite. Moving on to observation platforms and sensors, spatial resolution of RGB images derived from remote sensing platforms is typically defined by the ground sampling distance, which can be estimated using camera altitude, sensor width, focal length, and image width. So this means that a smaller GSD corresponds to a higher spatial resolution, allowing for the detection of smaller plastic debris. On the left is figure 2, which summarizes representative GSD values and the corresponding snapshot coverage achievable by each platform. Webcam coverage was the biggest because it can cover minutes, hours, and days, as well as achieve a small GSD. The coverage estimates for each platform listed here were calculated assuming the camera is mounted vertically using the square root of GSD with the total number of pixels in an image. From here, to contextualize the technical performance and field applications of each platform, a platform-by-platform review in order of decreasing spatial resolution will be explained to highlight their typical applications, technical capabilities, limitations, and suitability for monitoring plastic debris in diverse environmental settings. So I will begin with webcam-based monitoring of beaches and riverbanks. Typically, surveys are carried out with fixed cameras that enable remote observation of target areas without human intervention. With the increase in camera quality, GSD dropped, which allowed for feasible quantification of item count or estimate of litter covered area. When installed near river or riverbanks, studies typically estimate plastic litter flux, and detailed classification is achieved through visual observations or machine learning techniques. However, webcam-based monitoring is not without limitations. First installation requires elevation and battery sustainability, which makes installation big and bulky. Additionally, fluctuating water levels can influence results, and while data transfer via cloud-based uploads is increasingly common, some still require manual retrieval of data from storage devices. When talking about webcam installation with Dr. Kako in Taiwan, he mentioned that for some places, they had to drill holes into rocks or structures or cement the entire this webcam structure to the ground, so getting permission was a very big challenge for them. Next, I move on to drones. Drones emerge as a viable alternative to manual observations because it offers key advantages, including high mobility, reproducibility, ease of operation, and cost effectiveness. Specifically, it enables acquisition of high-resolution images with low GSD, which is suitable for surveying microlitter across diverse environments. With mapping, drones can provide accurate geolocation data for each litter item, enabling spatial distribution analysis and identification of accumulation hotspots. I attach a picture from our Skynight Citizen Science program on the bottom left, and you can see that the post-processing technique here is highlighted in green. Here, drone images were stitched together and it was analyzed to generate an estimate of physical characteristics such as number of items, volume, and bulk weight. This is another example of the structure for motion that can enable the reconstruction of 3D structure of plastic litter. If you see the image 4A is the image from a smartphone, then C is the image after it has gone through the digital surface model. I will also show you a video of how they use the drone images shown in 4B and moved into a 3D structure. 1 second. So this is the image, the drone that they took, and then from there, they will create a 3D structure of it. Once they develop this, then later you will see that they use this for the image segmentation to identify each item. One second. One second, please. Okay. So as I explained earlier, photos are taken, then stitched together, then processed even further to generate just now that 3D structure. Not only calculating the number, but with the 3D structure and GPS coordinates, they can even calculate the waste volumes, even though the items are buried into the ground, like half buried into the ground. However, drone surveys are not without limitation because most drone battery life is short, which limits operational range. Additionally, optimal flight altitude must also count for camera specifications, legal regulations, and surrounding environmental conditions. The next one is balloons, which are the earliest remote sensing application for detecting plastic litter. The concept is fairly simple. Digital cameras are suspended from helium-filled balloons, which were controlled by a string either from land or vessel. However, balloons are hard to control in windy conditions. Camera angles cannot be adjusted during flight and is generally inefficient. Moving on to aircraft. Aircraft has the capacity to rapidly survey extensive coastal and offshore areas. Video imagery and observer-defined thresholds to detect color anomalies such as the ghost nets and post-typhoon waves as shown in the two images below. With the fine spatial resolution, recent studies have also incorporated machine learning techniques to automatically detect and quantify plastic debris, as you can see in the image E and F. However, spatial accuracy and image consistency is limited for aircraft monitoring. Unlike drones, aircraft cannot easily acquire overlapping images for mapping, and high speeds make it difficult to capture precise locations. Also, resolution and detection capability is limited, so it is difficult to identify plastic debris smaller than 50 centimeters. For satellites, it offers GSD ranging from a few meters to tens of meters with distinct advantage of global coverage, including offshore regions. The passive optical sensors detect plastic based on their spectral signatures and can be classified broadly into two categories, which is multi-spectral sensor and hyperspectral sensor. The limitations of using satellite is that there's minimal detectability lifter size. Validation of data remains a major challenge due to scarcity of ground truth data and the lack of methodological consistency across satellite-based studies. Makes it difficult to utilize satellite overall. Although these reviews primarily focus on surface and shoreline litter detection, several studies have explored the detection of submerged plastic debris using imaging sonar and video-based technologies. As you can see from the example images I attached below here, this method leverages differences in acoustic reflection, intensity between plastic items, and the surrounding water to identify debris. It's usually complemented using visual monitoring techniques using ROVs and AUVs. If you see the picture on the bottom right, you can see the limitations that they mention in the paper. Specifically, water turbidity makes the images have different colors. Some is brighter, some is more bluish. And also you can see how there is limited field of vision for this kind of method. Moving on to the next section, which we will focus on detecting and quantifying plastic litter by image analysis. There are three main image analysis methods. First is the three main image, the first is visual inspection and manual classification. Second is rule-based approach, and third is machine learning. For visual inspection and manual classification, this is the most traditional and widely adopted method for detecting and quantifying plastic debris. Experts either conduct field survey or examine remote sensing imagery to identify litter items, classify their types, and measure their abundance. However, this method is inherently subjective because results may vary depending on the observer's expertise and judgment. Also, visual inspection is time-consuming and labor-intensive, especially when dealing with large-scale image datasets from aerial and satellite platforms. For rule-based approach, this approach is based on the quantification of plastic litter by identifying litter-covered areas based on pixel brightness. Here, time series data is generated by detecting pixels with brightness values, lightness, red, green, blue, yellow channels, or color-based analysis as shown in the example image below. However, this method relies on manually defined threshold values, which limit their accuracy, adaptability, and scalability. For machine learning-based approach, this methodology allows for more flexible image analysis by learning complex features from large image datasets. Additionally, deep learning is a subclass of machine learning utilizing multi-layered neural networks that excels at recognizing complex object shapes and demonstrates superior generalization performance across diverse conditions. There are two main tasks of machine learning. First is image segmentation, or sometimes known as semantic segmentation. This method identifies each pixel in an image as belonging to predefined classes, which is suitable for estimating the area, volume, and weight of litter distributed over entire beaches. However, this method is limited by the individual item count. For object detection, excuse me, its main purpose is to identify and count. Sorry. Oh, my script is wrong. Sorry. The main task for object detection is localizing and classifying individual litter items using bounding box or mass. So this is the method that we use for urban nights, and it's designed to identify or count distinct items by predicting bounding boxes for each object. Additionally, for deep learning models used in litter detection of satellite-based studies, semantic segmentation is often implemented using classical machine learning algorithms with relatively small number of parameters, but this makes it difficult to distinguish individual plastic litter items. For high-resolution imagery obtained from drones or other platforms, deep learning approaches have become more dominant as they are capable of automatically learning hierarchical visual features from large annotated datasets, enabling more accurate detection and classification of plastic litter under diverse and complex conditions. Some of the common CNNs are object detection like YOLO and faster RCN, while for semantic segmentation are like UNet or HRNet. So in general, with these models, deep learning models generally achieve higher detection accuracy compared to classical machine learning. In terms of dataset selection and transferability, training data are essential for developing accurate models, and data collected from different platforms can often be shared. However, high annotation costs hinder dataset creation, and region-specific characteristics complicate generalization, and harmonizing traditional monitoring methods with AI-based approaches is challenging due to differences in observable resolution and classification systems. So in order to overcome these limitations, the authors suggest that in the future, synthetic datasets generated through 3D graphics can be used to address data scarcity. In their discussion, comparisons were made between the methods based on GSD, suitability for specific areas, regional coverage, and observational time interval, with the most suitable or best performing method is rated as 5. You can see that as of now, web camera seems to be able to cover the largest area for suitability and best performing method, followed by drone. In this section, they also discuss the need and challenges of standardizing monitoring methods around the world and provide suggestions for a multi-platform integration, but I did not include that. For the conclusion part, monitoring and quantifying plastic pollution is essential for assessing the current environmental status of plastic debris and informing evidence-based policies to mitigate plastic waste. The development of open access platforms will allow stakeholders to contribute plastic litter imagery captured via various remote sensing platforms. It's important to generate standardized estimates of plastic litter abundance. And finally, in the last part of their paper, they advertised their web launch Jamstack, a website which allows users to upload photographs and obtain estimates of plastic litter coverage through automated deep learning analysis.